Hi there, this is Luisa Heinzel. Thank you very much for joining me today. I had some sleepless nights and one of the reasons for that is this new stamp set by Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous, which is part of Tim's new release that he has just thrown out to the creative world. This stamp set is called Creative Blocks and the number is CMS464. When I saw this stamp set for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, this was made for me. This is just so cool and I got so many ideas from this stamp set. And one of the ideas that came to my mind I would like to share with you today. I want to stamp into clay and then bake that and later on color that with alcohol inks to get those cool fragments that you can see here. I know that this is a really abstract version of those stamps. When you stamp them to paper, of course, you get way more of those details. These are really, really amazing. They stamp it's like being in heaven when you stamp with those stamps. But of course, that's with all of the Tim Holtz stamps. That's the reason why I love them so much. They are just really good quality and they have so much detail. But what I'm trying to say is this is a really abstract version of those stamps. And I know that. And I know that this is perhaps not everyone's taste, but perhaps you see this and you have the same feelings about that like I have. Because I can imagine these on junk journal pages. Look how thin you can make them. This is not thicker than a thin button, I would say. Why is my camera not focusing on that? Really thin. I mean, we always have some issues with bulk in junk journals, but I would say that this is acceptable. And I can imagine including those into collages or clusters on tags. They would look really great. And if you want to make them a little bit thicker, you can also, of course, put them to a junk journal cover. I mean, how amazing is that? This looks like real stone and it's just amazing. I'm also planning to share with you my process of making a journal about my last holiday that I have spent in Rome. And yeah, I think I don't have to say anything else because this is Rome. Yeah, it's so cool. All of those fragments totally remind me to that city and what I have seen there. And that is perhaps the reason why I feel so connected with this stamp set. So let's go into this. I will tell you what I have on my desk here. And today I have to say I can't give you so many alternatives. And unfortunately, you have to search for those by yourself because I'm working with some mediums and materials that I haven't used so often in the past. I don't have so much experience with those. And that's the reason why I don't know so many alternatives. Do you know what I mean? For this project, of course, we are going to need some clay. Without clay, it could be a little bit difficult. I'm going to use steam clay. This is a special clay made by Funkelkram. Perhaps you know Jutta from Funkelkram. She has a YouTube channel as well. I will link her shop and the channel down below for you. But I guess you can use any other clay that you can bake in your oven later. So this is available in different colors. As you can see, I have this beige, this gray. I also have some white and some black here. If you are looking for like a more metal look, you can use black as the base. I mean black clay. If you are looking for more like vintage stone look, then you could use a color like this. If you want to have some really bright and nearly white highlights later, you could use white as a base. So I have used the white clay for example, this and this and this and this and this. And you can see that those details are really white in the end compared to, for example, the brown one, which is more like matchy in different shades of brown. Then I have some blending solution here on my desk, and I've already filled that into this mini mister. I have StazOn cleaner here. I will tell you in a second why. Then I have this tool which you normally use for ink blending, and I have put this sanding disc to it. I would say this is optional. You could also use some really fine sandpaper, but I like this because it has this handle and it's really, yeah, handy. I also have some white acrylic paint here because I have black clay here. And you know, alcohol ink on black clay, that is a problem. So I want to show you an alternative. If you don't have alcohol inks, you could also use some white acrylic paint, or of course any other color that you have. And I have my alcohol inks here because the main idea behind this is to use alcohol inks. But I know that many of you perhaps don't have that, and you're searching for alternatives. So I will show you a way how it can work with acrylic paint as well. What you also could use are the distress crayons. That also works really, really well, and you can get some really great details out of your fragments later with these crayons. What I also have here on my desk is this little thing here. That looks a little bit weird. This is just some alcohol, which I have used to clean my brush when I worked with alcohol ink. And I always save this because there comes the day where you can use exactly this and where you need like a little sludge liquid. Do you know what I mean? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my clay and please have in mind what you know about the clay that you are going to use. Every clay, I guess, is a little bit different and reacts a little bit different to the temperature of your room, of your hands, and so on. So I will just make this a little bit more flexible by doing it like this. And then I will make some little balls out of that. So just like this is perhaps already a little bit thick, but yeah, we can vary that a little bit. So I will just make some more in different colors. Okay, so here we go. When I have these little balls, I'm just going to press these a little bit so that they get flat. Then I have, yeah, something like a circle. Perhaps you think, okay, this is a square and this is a circle. Don't freak your freak. It's easier for me to make a circle first and then later on turn that into squares. The steam clay is really, really good for that because when it's really thin, you can cut that with your scissors after baking it. Please make sure, if you want to do it exactly like this and make circles first, please make sure that you can cut your clay after baking it. Otherwise, you would have a problem. But you can also, of course, just turn them into squares by putting a little bit more effort into this step. I mean, this is a square already, yeah? And it doesn't have to be perfect. So when I have that, I do it like this. And then I'm going to take an acrylic plate and just giving this a little massage. That way they get a little bit more flat and a little bigger. But the main reason is I want to have them flat. Okay, so like this. Then I can open this again and I will leave them on this baking paper when I put them into my oven in a second as well. So I will take exactly this paper and bring that to my oven. But first, we have to stamp into them, of course. And when I tried this out for the first time, I realized that this clay is relatively sticky. So that means I found out that I can't take my stamp as it is and press that into the clay. I need something to avoid this stickiness. And then I came to the idea to use some StazOn cleaner. This is made with some kind of oil, I guess, which is really helpful for this technique. So I'm doing the following thing. I'm just putting some of this. So this has also this little like dauber, I always don't know the name, which has a little felt here so that you can just do it like this. And I put a really good amount of this to the piece of clay and to the stamp as well, which I have already attached to this acrylic block here. And when I have that, I press that into the clay, and for pressing it, I'm going to stand up from my chair to be able to lean onto this with the weight of my body. Carefully take that out, and as you can see, there's not much left on the stamp from the clay. You can see some white areas here. That's a tiny little bit that is sticking in here. As I said, you can clean that off like you would clean your stamp if it was only ink that's on here. And here you can't see this so well, but this is a really great impression of the stamp. So let's choose another one. And one thing that I want to mention is there are stamps that have really like deep, I don't know the word, but you know, this, the image is really deep carved into the rubber. And some are only those little like, really like, there was pressed a hair into the rubber. Do you know what I mean? Really thin, really tiny, and not so deep. So I'm assuming that I get a better impression from this stamp, which has more of those deeper areas, than from this. But both are possible. But if you have a really like delicate stamp, then you would get a more abstract result than with a stamp that is really like deep. Or you can also, of course, use some stamps that have more solid images. I'm thinking about, for example, those wildflowers by Tim Holtz and Stamp Anonymous. That would look also really great on those fragments. Or if you have some that have letters or numbers, then this can get way more concrete. Yeah, but I want to have this stone look in the end, because that fits my needs for my future projects. And you can see I had some ink on my stamp as well, because I haven't cleaned it last night when I stamped with these, but that doesn't matter. You get some ink to your clay, don't care about that. That will be covered with the alcohol ink later and you won't see it anymore. So let's take perhaps this one here. And I will just go on and stamp more of these. I think I want to use this on the white one so that you can see what happens when there's ink left on the stamp. Ooh. Look, that looks a little bit weird, but please believe me, that will get better in the end. It will look really amazing. So I will go on with stamping, and then I will take this and I will put that into my oven and bake it there, following the instructions on the package of the clay. I think that's also a little bit different depending on which clay you use, please just follow the instructions. These are now baked, meaning they are completely hard, but still a little bit flexible. That's the good thing about this steam clay that I have used. And now we can start coloring them with some alcohol inks. And I found out a thing, I don't know if that's with every clay, but with this clay, it's a little bit weird because I will show you that here on one of the back sides so that I don't ruin my front side. When I now take an alcohol ink and I put that directly from the bottle to one of these pieces, you can see it doesn't spread so well, but that's normal, I would say. The surface is not smooth enough to let the ink spread, but when I now add a little bit of blending solution or also alcohol, then you can see that it goes around a little bit. But when I now wipe this off, I get this really like weird shape. The ink makes a little like mark here, and I don't really like that. And I also want to bring out the details of my stamp impression, of course. And for that, I have to be able to rub over that later, to rub some of the ink off from the clay. And this is really weird because when I now take some alcohol, you can see this stays here where it is. So I can't wipe that off anymore and it stays here. And that's not so good. So for that, I found a solution that is relatively easy, I would say. And that's the reason why I have this little weird alcohol liquid here. So this is just some alcohol with the rest of alcohol ink that I had left over on my paintbrush after making some other projects. And I always keep this, and here it's a good thing to use, because when I now take this and put that here to my pieces, I get this like layer of the alcohol and the rest of the ink here to be able to let the other colors that I want to add in a second move around better. And when this is like brownish, you also get a really nice effect here, because then you already have some vintage color on those pieces. And then let's play around with some color. So I think for this one, I want to go with some brown and gray. So let's take teak wood. And I'm just going to let this drip into this already like wet surface. And you can, of course, also let that move around a little bit by moving the clay. So just like this. And I'm going to add some mushroom because I want to have this relatively like vintage. Just like this. And when you see that you have a lot of ink here, it's good to let some of that run off from here. I'm just taking the next piece to don't waste the ink, and I'm just putting it here like this, so that you don't have too much alcohol ink on such a piece, because that takes, of course, very long to dry, and when you have too much, it stays a little bit sticky, and I don't want that. So here we already now have a really nice color, but perhaps we can add some variation by adding perhaps some turquoise. So I'm going with mermaid. I haven't tried that on this like beige clay yet, so I want to try if I can get a patina here with this like brownish turquoise mixture, just like that. let that drip to the other piece here, so don't waste it. That's a really cool trick, I would say. So we have a great color here as well, and you can see as soon as you add the ink, the stamp impression comes out really well, and you get this gorgeous pattern here now that you now can see. But we will do something else later so that we can bring out the details even better. And then I'm going to let these dry, and while they are drying, I want to take this black one and show you an alternative if you perhaps don't have alcohol ink. And the other thing is, on black clay, I can't use my regular alcohol ink because I wouldn't see anything. But what you can do is, you can take some white acrylic paint. This I have just mixed with some water to make it more liquid. But I guess you can also dry brush this to the clay with, you know, acrylic paint that you haven't mixed with water. And then I'm just putting that on there. That doesn't have to be much. And then I'm going to take a fabric just like this. Don't take a paper towel, because then you would have all of those little fluffy things from the paper towel in the clay. And now I'm going to rub over this relatively aggressively. Don't panic, nothing can happen there, because this is really sturdy. You can't destroy the pattern anymore when this is baked. And this is perhaps a little bit like too grayish for me, so you can also make this a little bit wet. So this is just some regular water. Perhaps that was too much. Let's do it like this and go over that to get some more contrast. And as you can see now, I am laying my finger relatively flat to the surface like this, so that I don't rub off too much, just like this. To me, this already looks really interesting. It's relatively abstract. As I said in the beginning, what you get from this technique is really an abstract impression of the stamp. And I like that. I know that's not everyone's taste, but I like that. And especially in combination with using the stamp on a paper and stamping it like you would normally stamp it with ink, yeah? And combining that with this, it's just amazing. But perhaps you want to have some more details, and you can get them. So one possibility would be to take a little bit more of the acrylic paint and just repeat the step that I have just done. But an easier way is to take a distress crayon or another crayon that you have and just go over that, just scribble around here like you would do it with those, you know, those metal pieces as well, you know, those metal pieces that have some writing or something on them, and you perhaps want to have that a little bit more visible or with a color, then you would do it exactly the same. And this works here, of course, as well. This doesn't stay completely white, but that's because my finger is so dirty. I'm sorry. I get a little patina here as well from my finger. And then I can take a dry part of my fabric here. I'm just rubbing over that to get the crayon into the details. So perhaps we want to compare that with the stamp. So here you can see how it would look where if you would stamp it to a paper. And I think this is it's just gorgeous. You can see what it is. And as I said, if you combine that with the stamp impression that you get with ink from the stamp on a paper, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And yeah, so we are going to let this dry a little bit. And let's look at these. they are not completely dry yet, so I will take my heat gun and I will quickly dry them. And we can do exactly the same thing like we've done with the crayon to rub something of this off. But in this case, I need alcohol to get rid of the ink that is too much here. So I'm just dipping that into this little bowl here. You could also use some clean alcohol, but I have this here, why not use it? And then I have that here, and I'm carefully starting to go over this. And you will see that in some areas, here for example on this frame, you can rub off the ink that is too much really easily to bring out the frame and also some of the details here. I would suggest to start relatively carefully. Depending on which clay you have, it can be perhaps a little bit differently, because here I need much pressure to get the ink off, which is too much. But I guess there are clays available where it's easier to rub that off. And of course you don't want to get this white again, yeah? So we only want to rub some of this off to bring the details out a little bit better. And I'm just realizing how cool it looks when the other ink is below here. This is the piece which I had stamped with the stamp where some archival ink was left on the stamp. And that looks just amazing. It makes nearly like a marbled effect in the background. Can you see that? It's really amazing. I really like that. So when I have the feeling I need more alcohol, then I need more alcohol. I take more alcohol, because here it's still a little bit like not so much contrast. And I don't like this light green here on the frame, so I will get rid of that as well. Just like that. And I will do that with all of the others as well. And I think it helps when you start on the frame of your piece, so here where nothing of the stamp impression is, to get a feeling for how much you want to take off. But please try that out and do that like it's comfortable for you. So here it's relatively hard to see that some of the ink gets off here, because the clay is so brown, and yeah, you know, it's not so easy to see. But don't panic if you have something like this. We can bring out even more details on this. I will just rub over the others here. Whew. Okay, so when we have that, we can be happy, but it's not so perfect yet. So to bring out more details here, you have two possibilities. Let me show you two of my pieces that I have made with both of the possibilities that I found out that you can use now. So this one here, you can see that looks totally different than this, but both have white or something that is nearly white. Here I have used some sanding, this sanding disc. Alternatively, you could also use a really fine sandpaper. So with that method, you get the original color of the clay to your raised parts of the stamp impression. On this one here, I've used some white distress crayon and just rubbed that in, and I have sanded the edges a little bit. So what you can see here, those lighter parts I got with the sanding, and this white here I got with the crayon, but it didn't stay completely white. I guess that was because the alcohol ink was not completely dry when I added this, but I like both of these. I mean, it's a totally different look, of course, but I really enjoy this variation that you can get with that. So let's perhaps start with this one. So this is the one with the one of those with the white clay. And when I now go over the edges here, I can of course distress them a little bit. I get a really nice white distressed edge. And when I do this, I do that with no pressure. And that's also the reason why I don't put it to my table and go over it like this, because then it could happen that I add too much pressure and I destroy the area here. So the best thing is, which works for me, is to hold it like this on the very edge and go over it like this. And you can see when I do that in slow motion, when I do it like this, I press that down. Because of the weight of this thing, it goes down automatically, but I go over that with no pressure. Yeah, I can't explain that. Perhaps you know what I mean. So when we have that, it looks like this, and I'm already relatively satisfied with this. This area here came out not so detailed, but do you know what I just think? A tiny, tiny little like die cut flower or leaf or something like that. A tiny stamp of a bird, for example, or a quote. I mean, so many possibilities. If you want to have more details, you can of course additionally take the distress crayon. So I will just show you how that can come out. And then you have some more details, as you hopefully can see. So let's do that here as well and just go around this. Here, this is the beige clay. And this is, of course, a totally different look because the contrast of the distressing that you get now and the clay itself is not so big, which makes it look like more stone-ish. And even if we now can't see so much more detail of this, I think it looks more interesting. Yeah, we got some details with the crayon here and also here in the middle, but it's not so much more than before, but it makes it more interesting, I think. And perhaps you are wondering how I came from this like weird round shape to this, which I have shown you in the beginning. This piece is now, I would say, an abstract square. It's a little bit wonky, of course. But when I made this, it had a similar shape like these that we've just made. Steam clay, which is the clay that I have used here, can be cut with scissors when it's thin after baking. Yeah, that means I have just taken such a piece and then I have cut out my square with some scissors and I went over the edges with the sanding disc to get them a little bit more smooth. So now we have several of these and I'm so happy. I'm just so happy. I mean, please imagine you would put these to a junk journal cover, for example. I mean, I probably wouldn't mix them up so much. I would probably make, if I want to use them for a junk journal cover, I would probably make a batch of those in similar colors, yeah, so that we perhaps, let me show you what I mean, that we perhaps only have like those vintage brownish colors, for example, like this, that looks more harmonious, I would say. Or you could also go with, let's say, more patina in this turquoise color palette. That also would be really great. But what I also like is to put one of these black pieces here and then put some other colors around. So let's, for example, take the green ones, this yellowish thing. I think that could work together really well. Just like this, for example. that is more colorful, of course. It's not so vintage. I mean, it's vintage because of this book that I have used for this to demonstrate that, but the colors themselves are not so vintage, I would say. If you want to go more with this stonish look, you could also, for example, arrange them like this. Or what I also can imagine is to use the same stamp on several different of those pieces. So this was made with this, these were made with the same stamp. And imagine you would have more of these. I mean, we have this one here. And you would, for example, just let's do it like this. Isn't this just great? That looks so cool. You can also just take one stamp and get so many different variations out of that. I'm just in love with this. This is just amazing. Okay, so that's what I have here now, and I'm so hoping that you like it as much as I do. I'm so in love with these little guys, and you will definitely see those in some of my future videos. Not all of them, but definitely some of them. If you want to see some close-up pictures, then please visit my Instagram. It's linked down below. Of course, you can also follow me there for some more content that you also can save as a photo. Perhaps you also want to see some things that I have made with the new release from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. I have posted some things to my Instagram where I haven't made a video tutorial. So perhaps you want to see that. Then I would, of course, be really happy if we see on the other platform, Instagram, as well. And I hope you have some clay at home and perhaps some alcohol inks or some acrylic paint. Perhaps you will find some more things that you could do with this technique. Let me know if you find out something that I didn't cover in this video. Perhaps you have some other ideas. Just write a comment below this video. I would be really happy about that. So let's inspire each other and let's create something beautiful. I wish you a very, very great day. See you the next time. Bye bye.